Welcome to Fashion Reverie Talks. I am Cicily Daniels.
I am Tijana Ibrahimovic.
Fashion Reverie takes you from the front lines of fashion to the front row.
All of Fashion Reverie Talks segments are based on published content found on fashionreverie.com.
So remember, if you want more information on the segments, go to fashionreverie.com. And if you like this episode, don't forget to like this episode of YouTube and subscribe.
In this episode, we're happy to have menswear designer extraordinaire John Bartlett, and we have once again Fashion Reverie Associate Editor Kristopher Fraser to talk about the intersection of fashion and politics. But let's start with fashion alerts and fashion news. And all of our news segments are based on the fashion news alerts found on fashionreverie.com. So, Cicily, why don't you kick off the fashion news?
Well, let us jump right in. I am going to start with the Victoria's Secret fashion show that took place in New York City on October 15th. Now, I feel like if you were anywhere, if you were like nearby New York, there was so much like buzz about this, so much advertisement, and Victoria's Secret really came back in a big way. There was a stunning comeback with a runway extravaganza, and this is the first one that has happened since 2019. So this is very exciting. There is new messaging, which is including diversity, inclusion. There were plus size models, transgender models, a lot of huge names that people know. Gigi Hadid opened the show. Tyra Banks was, I think she also walked, and there were over 50 models. It was really like a who's who of models. Everyone looked incredible. And I think it was really like a return to form for Victoria's Secret. So I think it was really exciting. What do you think, Tijana?
I loved it. I thought it was very exciting to watch, the return of the Victoria's Secret. I'm a fan. I love their lingerie. So they always fit me well. So I'm excited to be back. Well, I'm going to bring a less sexy news alert. I always get these topics, but a former Abercrombie and Fitch CEO, Mike Jeffries, and two others were arrested on Tuesday for alleged sex trafficking of more than a dozen victims. Jeffrey and his partner, Matt Smith, and a third man, Jim Jacobson, are accused of operating an international sex trafficking ring, recruiting young men from parties in the US and other countries in a 16-count indictment. So they obviously used their connections at the Abercrombie and Fitch, the network of business contacts, and the financial wealth to lure in young men. So it was kind of if you remember, in front of Abercrombie and Fitch stores, usually you would see young, attractive men at the entrance.
Right.
To me, that was attraction, but apparently it wasn't just for women.
Gosh, wow. Well,
So, apparently they created this business plan in 2008 and flew young men all over the world to engage in sex parties and sex acts.
Well, for people who do things like this, I love when they get caught. So good for them. And of course, our thoughts are with any victims and, anyone who's dealing with that aftermath. My goodness. So my last bit of fashion news today is about Dwayne Wade, who is pairing fashion and sports with a new job. Now, Wade will be a fashion editor at Karine Roitfeld and Vladimir Restoin Roitfeld's new sports-focused publication, which is going to be called See Our Men. It will highlight the intersectionality between sports and style, with a focus on trends, athletes' personal fashion, and the launch is going to include collabs, merchandise drops, e-commerce, and See Our Men is going to launch in the spring of 2025. And in the first issue, Dwayne Wade will be featured draped in racer leather, sharp suiting, and gleaming jewelry. I like that description. So I think I'm excited just to see that first issue. I think that sounds exciting.
Absolutely. I agree with you. It sounds pretty exciting.
Well, viewers, that is it for this week for our fashion news alerts, but you know where to go, fashionreverie.com, if you want to keep up to date and know what's going on in the fashion news.
So viewers, our next treat for Fashion Reverie Talks today is a special interview with fashion designer John Bartlett. John, welcome to Fashion Reverie Talks.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday. So we know that you're a Harvard University graduate. That said, you took a little bit of a different turn from what you originally planned as your career. And so I would love to know what took you to the journey into the fashion industry as a fashion designer.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Ohio, and in Ohio, Cincinnati, it was a very conservative place. I wasn't raised to think of myself creatively, but I always knew that I loved clothing, and I liked the use of clothing as a means of expression. When I went to Harvard, I thought I would go to law school. My parents hoped I would go to law school or business school. I thought I might get into communications or marketing. And I studied sociology, but I found that as I got older, as I went through my Harvard career, what I really loved was studying about cultures, society, tribes, and I also love clothing. And again, I found that clothing for me was a means of expression. And so when I graduated from Harvard, I ended up going to London to study economics, which was my parents' dream. And it wasn't my dream, but I thought I'll go to London anyway, because who doesn't want to live in London? So I went to London. I was 22 years old, and I fell in love with the street culture in London. I decided, okay, fashion is going to be my means of expression. It's going to be the way that I make a difference. So I moved to New York at 22, 23, and I started taking night classes at MIT, the Fashion Institute, and I wasn't sure if I would be a designer, go into marketing, merchandising, PR, but I took the time and I just tried to meet everybody that I could. But it was funny. Harvard taught me how to think. Harvard taught me how to think about society and culture and how to look at the world. And so I took what I learned at Harvard and then applied it to my design sensibility.
I mean, that's actually an excellent combination, because a lot of fashion designers lack, other abilities related other than creativity, right? So I bet that must have helped you with launching your own brand as well in 1991. So after working with some esteemed designers, correct? How did you start your own line?
Well, and I have to say, yes, thank you. That was a good point. I think going to Harvard certainly helped me. It opened the door, because I think a lot of people were intrigued by the idea of who's this guy who's from Harvard who's now a fashion designer. So I think that it helped to open doors because people were curious. And so in 1991, 92, I had worked for a couple of great designers, good brands. And it's kind of a sad story, but it's a true story. In the late 80s, early 90s, the fashion community and the gay community was being decimated by AIDS. And one of my best friends, Rick Hamilton, was a very, very gifted designer. He was working for Tommy Hilfiger. He had also come from Ohio, and we had a dream of starting a business together. We wanted to create a label together, and That was our dream that we talked about it all the time. And he got sick and he died. Gosh, I think he was maybe 30 years old. He was just a kid. But
Mm.
I had spent a lot of time with him in his last months. And after he died, I felt that life is too short and that why not try to live my dream, even though it was our dream, my friend and mine. Why don't I try to live this dream? I had no money. I had experience, but I really had no real idea of what it took to start a label. But I'm like, you know what? Life is too short and I'm going to do this. So I literally just started buying some fabric. I started making some clothes. I was cutting patterns on my floor in my apartment. Um, all of those kind of ideas that you would imagine a young designer doing anything that you can. And I put together a small collection and
Mhm.
my first order came from Bergdorf Goodman in New York. So it
Wow.
started, I remember that day so well. So it started off good. And I think again, there was not, I did menswear. There was not a lot of menswear design going on in New York. And in New York, menswear was always about Ralph Lauren or Brooks Brothers, very classic, traditional preppy. So I wanted to create something that was a little bit edgier and combined American with a more European sensibility.
Oh, that's lovely. So in the 90s, you were part of a sort of a very well-known today American designers like Byron Lars, Isaac Mizrahi, Todd Oldham, and many others. So could you speak about what that time was like?
Sure. It was a very exciting time. And when I look back at it, it was a much simpler time. Of course, as designers, we would come up with two collections a year, maybe three. I would call the buyers on the phone, hoping that they're going to answer their landline at their office, try to make an appointment. They would come to my apartment or to our showrooms. And this was before internet, this was before e-commerce, and this was really before people having their own stores. So we built very strong relationships with the department stores, with Berger Goodman or Saks Fifth Avenue or Neiman's or Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, Charivari. We worked very closely with the buyers and the retailers. And it was a very, very exciting time because I felt that there were certainly some established designers like Donna Karan and Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein, but there was a new group of younger designers coming up like Todd Oldham. And these were people that were breaking the rules. Byron Lars still continues to be an incredibly gifted designer, and he actually continues to drape and tailor his own pieces still. He's a true artist. So it was a really fun time to get to know all of these young designers. Isaac was incredible. And just to really, I think we would talk to each other and share our resources. We would say we were all looking for the same factories. Where did you get that fabric? Can you give me in touch? Can you get me the name of that buyer? We really stuck together.
That's amazing. Do you think that maybe today there is a little bit of a pivot of a positive change in the fashion industry?
Mhm. I think that so right now I'm working alongside my design. I work for Parsons in New York City at the college at the School of Fashion. And what I get very excited about is meeting with the young people who are young, quite young, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And I love to see what their ideas are. And what I think about the industry that is very positive is that a lot of designers are approaching fashion through the lens of social justice. They're thinking about climate change, they're thinking about environments, they're thinking about indigenous design. They're really thinking about the supply chain. They're thinking in a way that's much more connected. Whereas before, in my generation, we just made clothes, hoping to sell some clothing. Now the designers and the industry really try to think about how is this going to be affecting the environment? What is the lifeline? What's the life cycle of this garment? Who is making my clothing? So I think there's a lot of positive, but I also do feel that the industry is it's a tough time because there are too many clothes. There
Mhm.
are too many designers. There are clothing um, ending up in the landfills in the southern hemisphere. There are a lot of workers that are not being paid a living wage. There's a lot of pollution, a lot of carbon damage. There's so many bad things that are going on that the fashion industry really has to start to take responsibility for. So, on one hand, there's a lot of creativity and a lot of youthful energy around the idea of social justice, but there is still a lot of clothing being made that's being thrown away. And that part of the industry is something that I think we need to change.
Right. Very important. Um, so in addition um, to your fashion life, you're also a big animal advocate, and you have your own nonprofit, Tiny Tim Rescue Fund.
Right.
So I'd love to know a little bit more about it.
Absolutely. So I had an awakening of sorts, I would say about 15 years ago. I had always loved animals. I've always had dogs. And but I had an awakening and I read a book by Alicia Silverstone, the actress and the advocate. And she's a true animal advocate. And it was called The Kind Diet. And it was really her journey into the idea of veganism. I read this book, it changed my life. And then I started to meet more and more people that were working in the world of animal advocacy. And so it really changed the way that I design. I stopped using leather. I stopped using wool. I started using really all natural fabrics. So it changed not only my diet, but also my design sensibility. But I also decided that I wanted to give back and to really try to figure out how I can participate in helping animals who have no voice. So when my three-legged pit bull, Tiny Tim, died, I had rescued him from a shelter. He changed my life. And I always advocate for people to always consider adopting their pets from shelters or from rescue groups. So when Tiny Tim died, I started volunteering at the city shelter in New York in Harlem, and I met these amazing women who were all doing rescue. They were pulling dogs and cats off the euthanasia list and finding homes for them. So I started a foundation to raise money to help support their work. And now, 12 years later, I've raised a lot of money, and basically all the money that I raise, I give back to rescue groups. Have created a grants program. I go down to Louisiana and do rescue missions. So I work a lot with shelters down south, but I also work with a lot of the rescue groups really around the world. And it's a very, very poignant experience to be able to see um, when you've networked or helped a dog or a cat and see them in their final home. To me, there's nothing like it. And I've had that experience lately where I met a dog, Electra, who was 12 years old, and she had been living outside chained to a doghouse by a person who was mentally ill. She was rescued, brought into a shelter, but a 12-year-old dog has no place to live in the shelter. And anyway, I ended up finding a home for her. So it's been a really wonderful part of my journey.
Wow, that's incredible. And you've had it for 12 years. You must
Yeah,
have done a lot. I mean, after all, they are our best friends.
they are.
So what do you think is next for you? Are you more going to focus on your nonprofit or fashion or something else?
I'm kind of doing both. I really like the idea that I'd like to create product. I love to design. I continue to design and create things. I like to create product that I can sell or raise money to that goes back to my rescue group. So I'm spending a lot of time with Parsons teaching. I'm working on my nonprofit. And then I'm just kind of planting a lot of seeds. I love talking to people, seeing what's next. And I think that's what's so exciting about the fashion industry is that it's always evolving, always changing.
True. Well, thank you so much for joining us here at Fashion Reverie Talks, and excited to actually see what's next. Thank
Thank you so much for having me.
you.
Well, viewers, I am excited to once again get a chance to talk with one of my favorites, Fashion Reverie Associate Editor Kristopher Fraser, who is here to talk about the intersectionality of fashion and politics, which is very hot right now. Welcome back to the show, Chris.
Hi, Cicily. How are you this fine Saturday?
Oh my gosh, I am great. It is wonderful to see you. I first of all, I loved your article. I thought it was fantastic. And I think this is obviously, it's a really timely topic because of the election that is coming up.
Oh, yes, we've got a little over a week till we decide who will be the president-elect of the United States.
Exactly. Now, a lot of people don't think about politics and fashion in the same sentence, but there is really a lot of crossover between fashion and politics, particularly with this election coming up. Could you talk about that?
If you actually look at the fashion industry, going back all the way to the unfortunate era of the AIDS crisis, that was when you really saw fashion starting to become political because American fashion designers were forming organizations and trying to get out awareness because there's always has been a large contingent of LGBT members of the fashion industry.
Right.
So that was when you saw sort of the politicizing of fashion back in the 80s with fashion brands and companies trying to draw awareness to the politicizing of the AIDS crisis. Fast forward to more contemporary times, going back as early as 2008 to Barack Obama's election. Anna Wintour, who's the editor-in-chief of Vogue, was Barack Obama's fourth largest bundle donor.
Oh, I did not know that.
She was able to manage to pull off thanks to her very deep ties to Hollywood and the fashion industry.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah.
Looking back even at the 2016 election, fashion hopped on board that following February after the swearing in of Donald Trump, because that was just shortly before New York Fashion Week. And during New York Fashion Week that season, you saw the Planned Parenthood pins were like the it accessory of that February 2017 Fashion Week, as brands and companies and retailers were drawing awareness to some of the issues that current administration could have posed for women's rights, reproductive justice, funding for Planned Parenthood, which provides a lot of healthcare services to women who are low income. So fashion's been political, I'd say, for about the last 40 plus years. So while, when people think about fashion and clothing, that may not be necessarily jump immediately to thinking about the current state of American politics or voting or policy issues. But fashion's been, particularly in America, has been on the forefront of political movements going back as early as the 80s, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's been around for a while. Now, in this particular election season, there are definitely some fashion brands that are cashing in on the season. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, Old Navy has a lot of voting merchandise right now. They have about two or three specific like get out the vote voting related style t-shirts encouraging people to vote. So a lot of brands are not necessarily wanting to make their particular political leanings clear or try to alienate customers who might be on one side of the aisle or the other. So what you're seeing is a lot of voting related merchandise, just a lot of general things that say vote or get out the vote or GOTV and those type of things, just encouraging everybody who has the ability to vote to engage in the democratic process, no matter what side of the aisle they stand on.
Right, which I hope people are actually paying attention to.
Saks Fifth Avenue, which is one of the biggest retailers in America, for several weeks during September, they had a giant vote window display at their famous New York flagship store.
Yes.
Marc Jacobs released a pink voting version of his very well-known and best-selling tote bag, and that's already sold out on his website. So for anyone that was hoping to get their hands on it for voting day, Sorry, you missed the window.
Oh my God, I missed
Uh,
the window. It's a cute bag too. I liked it.
and it's actually more affordable than the standard tote because that one's just because the voting one's canvas, so we tried to make it affordable for general consumers.
Oh gosh. Now, the CFDA at the beginning of New York Fashion Week in September had a fashion and political march. Talk about that for us.
Yes, it was a march encouraging voting. It was a nonpartisan march, actually, even though it was led by Anna Wintour, who was known to be a very staunch supporter of the last several Democratic candidates
Mhm.
that the U.S. has seen. But the march was marketed as a nonpartisan march, and it was various members of the fashion industry, from Tom Brown to other members of the Council of Fashion Designers of America, and editors, influencers, stylists, just everyone marching the streets, telling everyone get out and vote. While, New York has so many eyes on it during Fashion Week, and it's still an event that generates hundreds of millions of dollars, and is
Mhm.
talked about even by the news outside of fashion and the traditional fashion publications. So this was a great way to raise awareness, and it was called Fashion or Future. And Zach Poston also designed a T-shirt for, I think it was either Gap or Old Navy, because they're all under the uh Gap Inc. umbrella, and he's the creative director for one of the brands. That
Mhm.
also another voting merchandise style T-shirt that
Yeah.
was done in collaboration with Fashion or Future after the march.
Well, you already mentioned this a little bit when you talked about the history of this intersectionality, but I know that there are a lot of issues that come to the fore during the election, like women's rights and LGBTQA kind of rights. What do you feel like is like burning and, like kind of really at the forefront, like right now, for this election and with like fashion?
Well, women and LGBT people make up a large contingent of the employees in the fashion industry
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
are two of the biggest markets when it comes to consumers.
Right.
Consumerism
Absolutely.
is heavily driven toward women and LGBT people.
Mm-hmm.
Reproductive justice is a huge issue in this election, especially after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, under the tilt of the current Supreme Court after Donald Trump's nominees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this election could stand to shape the Supreme Court until 2050.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big
Right.
hot topic for people.
Right. Right.
Um, Also, with the current conservative tilt of the Supreme Court, there's concern for what would happen to LGBT issues that have already been decided on, like same-sex marriage, issues like privacy, like Lawrence v. Texas, which gave two consenting adults the right to do whatever they want in their bedroom, regardless
Yeah.
of their
Yeah.
sexual orientation.
Right.
So these,
Right. Right.
yeah, so these are, even though they're not like immediate, so much as immediate like policy issues or things that could be proposed like within Kamal's like first 100 days of the Senate, they are things that uh it, Kamal's first 100 days as president, if she were to win to reshape the Supreme Court,
Right.
are still things that topics to think about that are
Yeah.
really big things.
Yes. Yes. For sure. Now, without sharing your political choice, which you do not have to do, do you feel like this intersectionality of fashion and politics will have a positive effect on the election?
Everyone buys clothes, and with something that's so everyday for somebody, just trying to create such a voice in history right now,
Right. Right.
I think it could potentially help things like voter turnout, which can make a big difference, especially in swing states.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, I just hope America does not go with a convicted felon.
I also do hope that America goes with a groundbreaking, amazing first possibility of a female Black South Indian descent president, and I'm so excited, and I've already voted by mail.
I think our in-person early voting, I think, may have started today in New York, so I'm going to go see if I can do that before Election Day, because yeah, I don't know about you, but the last time I tried to vote for President Day of, I was in that line for like a solid 2+ hours, and I got in it at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Yes, I'm doing too much traveling and too much working, so I had to absentee ballot, but mine already went in the mail. Viewers, we hope that you, Kristopher, this was a very insightful conversation. I appreciate you so much for taking your time to come out and talk to us about your article. And hopefully, this energy of getting out to vote will go forth from this episode because it's really important. So, everyone needs to get out there and make their voice heard and cast their vote for sure. Thank you so much, Kristopher.
Thank you, Cicily. And vote 2024, everybody.
Woo!
Well, viewers, that's it for this episode of Fashion Reverie Talks.
We would like to thank John Bartlett and Fashion Reverie Associate Editor Kristopher Fraser.
For information on these and other stories, go to fashionreverie.com. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.